The road to Zaravna curled like a snake through the Balkan Mountains, dust rising behind the old bus that groaned up the incline. Kalina Petrova sat by the window, chin resting in her palm, eyes lost in the dense pine forest that blurred past. It had been 14 years since she last stepped foot in this village. 14 years since the funeral. 14 years since she buried her mother, Valina, under a sky swollen with rain and unanswered questions. Her phone buzzed in her lap. No signal. Of course. Zaravna didn't belong to the modern world. It stood like a stubborn relic, untouched by time. The cobbled streets, the stone wells, the wooden houses with red-tiled roofs and eyes carved into the eaves, eyes that seemed to watch, to remember. The bus hissed to a halt at the square, where only two old men played chess beneath a chestnut tree. One of them lifted his head and squinted at her. Recognition passed across his weathered face like a shadow. He whispered something to his friend. They both watched her silently as she stepped off the bus with her suitcase and a worn leather satchel. Kalina had expected nostalgia. Instead, she felt unease. The house was exactly as she remembered, and exactly as she feared. It stood at the edge of the village, near the forest, its frame leaning ever so slightly, as if the earth itself wanted to forget it existed. The shutters banged in the wind. The iron gate creaked open without resistance. Baba Radka had died 3 weeks ago, and no one had touched the house since. Inside, the air smelled of dried herbs, dust, and something older, like the past had been bottled and left to rot. Wooden icons hung crookedly on the walls. Dried garlic braided into wreaths dangled from the beams. The grandfather clock still ticked, even though no one had wound it. Kalina set her things down and walked through the house. It felt smaller than it did when she was a child. More oppressive. Her footsteps echoed through the narrow hall. She found the attic door partly open. A wooden ladder extended down, as if someone had just gone up or come down. She climbed. The attic was filled with forgotten things. Old furniture draped in linen, cracked photographs, trunks locked with rusting clasps. But on a low table by the window, under a layer of dust, lay a leather-bound book. Unmarked. Unopened. She picked it up. Her name was written on the first page, in her mother's handwriting. She almost dropped it. The next page bled into memory, her mother's voice, her eyes. The strange things she used to say, the rules she followed, the locked cupboard she was never allowed to touch, the quiet arguments at night between her mother and Baba Radka, the whispers about keeping the family safe, no matter the cost. The entries were dated. They stopped abruptly 1 week before Valina's death. Kalina closed the book and looked out the small round window at the forest. Something moved between the trees. And for the first time since she arrived, Kalina felt the past wasn't finished with her. It had just begun. Kalina sat cross-legged on the attic floor, the journal heavy in her lap. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and slow, like a warning whispered through the clouds. She lit the oil lamp beside her. Its golden glow spread across the pages like the past being unearthed. October 12, 1991. I heard them again last night. The voices from the woods. Baba says it's the wind. I know it's not. Kalina read the entry again, heart thudding. The words were careful, written in neat Bulgarian script. Valina had always been precise, methodical. That made what followed all the more chilling. October 14th. She made me do it. The ritual. Again. I hate the chanting. I hate the taste of ash. But she says the blood keeps them away. I don't want to believe her. But then why does it work? Kalina's fingers trembled. She remembered none of this. She had been a child. 5, maybe 6. There were flashes, fragments, the smell of smoke, the sound of bells, her mother's trembling hands. The entries continued. October 18th. He came again. The one with the gray coat and the white eyes. Baba, let him in. She kissed his hand like he was a priest. But I saw the way he looked at me. Like I wasn't human. Like I was already his. Kalina stopped reading. She stared at the name written in the margin, Soder. No last name. Just that. A single, ancient name that tasted wrong in her mouth. She whispered it aloud. And in that moment, the oil lamp flickered. A draft? No. The attic window was shut. And yet, the air had turned bitter cold. She clutched the journal to her chest and descended the ladder. Her foot slipped on the last rung, catching her breath in her throat. She landed hard but steady. The living room was dark now, except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. It sounded faster. Her heart thudded to match it. She turned on the hallway light. It fizzed, then died. The journal pages fluttered on their own. Kalina opened to the last entry. October 24th. Kalina is too young to understand, but she must be the one to break it.
The chain. The pact.
I've hidden the key in the cupboard. The one she was never allowed to open. If I fail, she will find it. She must. Kalina slowly turned her gaze to the far corner of the hallway. There stood a low, black cupboard. The one with the iron lock. The one she'd never dared to touch.
Until now.
The black cupboard stood no taller than Kalina's hip, carved with ancient symbols she once thought decorative. Now, she wasn't so sure. The iron lock had rusted with time, but the door itself radiated a quiet hostility, as if it did not wish to be opened. She knelt before it. A bitter wind howled outside, though the windows were sealed shut. In the journal, Valina had written the key was hidden close. Kalina's eyes swept the hallway, nothing obvious. Then she remembered the old wooden cross above the doorframe. It hung at an angle. She reached for it. The moment she removed the cross, a faint click sounded inside the cupboard. Not a latch, a release. She hesitated, then opened the door. Inside lay a small, velvet pouch. She drew it out carefully. It was heavier than expected. When she poured the contents into her palm, she found not just a key, but a ring made of braided black hair, a bone carved with runes, and a dried flower she could not identify. The smell that rose from it was both floral and decayed. Tucked beneath these tokens was a folded paper. For her eyes only, it read, in her mother's handwriting. She unfolded it. It was a map of the village, hand-drawn, marked with red ink. A symbol was circled deep in the forest, near a place called Kamendir, the stone hollow. Scribbled notes surrounded it. Do not go alone. Only at dusk. He waits near the hollow.
He?
Soder? Thunder cracked above the roof. The floorboards creaked upstairs. Kalina froze. She was alone. Or she had been. She closed the cupboard and clutched the pouch to her chest. It was time to find out what her family had done. And why Soder, whoever or whatever he was, still waited in the woods. Dusk fell over Zaravna with the stealth of a predator. The trees swallowed the light, casting long blue shadows between their trunks. Kalina followed the map with a torch and a scarf wrapped tightly against the cold. The forest seemed to hum, as if alive and watching. She reached the path to Kamendir just as the last trace of sun vanished behind the hills. The hollow was a sunken clearing surrounded by jagged stones, many carved with the same sigils from the cupboard. At the center stood a stone altar, dark with age, cracked but still whole. She stepped into the hollow. A sudden silence fell. Not the gentle hush of nature. An absence. As though the woods had drawn breath and held it. She approached the altar. The runes on its face pulsed faintly in the fading light. Then she heard it, a voice.
Male.
Rough and low, like gravel sliding across steel. Kalina. She spun, torch trembling. A man stood at the edge of the trees. Tall, in a gray coat, white eyes gleaming in the gloom. Soder. She opened her mouth, but no words came. He stepped forward, barefoot on the frozen ground, leaving no prints. You've come for the truth. She nodded. He smiled, not with warmth, but with recognition. Then you must give something in return. He held out his hand. She did not take it. Instead, she reached into her coat and held up the pouch from the cupboard. The moment he saw it, Soder's smile vanished. You still carry her tokens. Kalina's voice returned, cold and defiant. What is this place? What did my grandmother do? Soder tilted his head. She fed the stones.
To keep the hollow closed.
The The pact was hers, and her mother's before. You are the last.
Kalina took a step back.
Last of what? She whispered. But Soder said nothing more. He simply raised one hand and pointed behind her. She turned. The altar had opened. Not cracked. Opened. And something beneath was stirring. The air turned thick. Kalina's breath shortened. Her torchlight flickered wildly as she backed away from the altar. The lid had slid aside to reveal a narrow stairway spiraling into the earth. She heard whispers rising from the dark. Not from any single voice, but hundreds, layered, ancient, and angry. Soder remained at the edge of the clearing. Go down, he said softly, or it comes up. She had no choice. Each step downward seemed to pull warmth from her skin, memory from her mind. She clung to the journal, now tucked beneath her coat, as though it were armor. The stair ended at a stone chamber. In the center stood a well, not of water, but of shadows. Around it were bones, small and old. Candles still burned, though no one had lit them. And etched into the wall, over and over, was her family name, Petrova. On the far wall hung a tapestry. Behind it, hidden in a crevice, she found a bundle of letters, all addressed to her mother. None had ever been sent. She read one, written in haste and fear. Valina, I tried to end it. I failed. Your daughter is marked. If you do not do what must be done, he will take her. He comes for blood, not forgiveness. The note was signed with an unfamiliar name. Ivana Petrova, her great-grandmother. Kalina stood in the chamber, the truth dawning like cold fire. This wasn't just a family curse. This was an inheritance. Kalina fled the chamber, the letters clutched tightly in her coat. When she emerged from the stone hollow, night had swallowed the forest whole. Soder was gone, but something else now followed her. She could feel it. The wind had stopped. The silence had returned, that heavy, wrong stillness that pressed against her skull like static. Back in the house, she barricaded the door, lit every candle she could find, and laid out the pouch's contents beside the letters. The ring made of hair, the carved bone, the flower. Each piece, she now realized, was part of the original offering, a pact sealed long before her time. The journal offered clues she had missed. In a footnote, her mother wrote of a second path, a way to rewrite the pact, to end it. But it required two things, the heir and the witness. She was the heir. But who was the witness? As she pondered, the candles dimmed one by one. Something scraped along the outside wall. Then a knock. A deliberate, soft, human knock. She approached the door slowly, every breath a weight. Standing there, soaked from the rain, was a boy. No more than 13.
Pale. Thin.
Eyes like hers. He said only one thing. I think I'm your brother. Kalina pulled the boy inside, bolted the door behind them. His clothes were too clean, his face too still. But when he looked at her, something in her chest twisted, recognition without memory. He introduced himself as Aliko. He told her he had lived with Baba Radka until her death, hidden in a cottage deep in the forest, raised in secret. The village knew nothing of him. Baba had made him promise never to leave the woods. Until tonight. She said he would come, that the pact would reach its end with us. Kalina sat reeling. All her life, she believed she was alone. An only child. Her mother never spoke of another. Why would she? Aliko placed something on the table. A photograph. Faded.
Torn.
It showed Valina holding two infants, twins. Kalina staggered back. They were both heirs. Two paths. Two souls. Aliko continued. Baba had prepared him for this night. He knew the words, the steps. The old right not to seal the pact, but to sever it. One heir must descend into the hollow. The other must remain above. Only one would return. Kalina stared at her brother in silence. The choice had already begun. underscore 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 underscore. Chapter 8. The Descent. The following evening, Kalina and Aliko walked side by side to Kamandir. The torchlight barely pierced the mist that had gathered across the ground like a living thing. No bird sang. No leaves stirred. They reached the hollow. The altar still stood open, the stairs yawning like a wound. Aliko turned to her. "I'll go down," he said calmly. "No," Kalina whispered. "You've lived this curse your whole life. Let me finish it." But Aliko only shook his head. "You still have memories. A future. I was raised in shadow." He smiled, small, tired, and brave. Before she could argue, he descended. Kalina waited above, fingers clenched white around the torch. Minutes passed, then longer. A tremor ran through the ground. A scream echoed from below, not of fear, but of resistance, of ritual. The wind rose. The woods wailed. Then silence. The hollow sealed itself shut. No stairs. No altar. Just soil. Kalina collapsed to her knees. Aliko was gone. And the curse was broken. Sunlight filtered through the trees for the first time in days. Birds returned to the branches. The village stirred with the sounds of normal life. But Kalina felt hollow. Back at the house, she placed the journal on the kitchen table. It no longer whispered. Its final page had changed. A new entry. August 3rd. He chose the dark, so I could choose the light. Remember him. There was no signature. But she knew. Aliko had fulfilled the rite. Kalina spent the day burying the items from the cupboard under the great chestnut tree. No more tokens. No more rituals. She burned the photograph last, not to forget, but to release. That night, she dreamed of the forest, not haunted, but peaceful. In her dream, a boy walked among the trees, barefoot and free, white flowers blooming in his wake. Weeks passed. Kalina remained in Zaravna, tending the house, restoring it slowly. She repaired the windows, oiled the clock, removed the herbs and relics. She opened the doors wide. She spoke to no one of what happened. The village respected silence. One evening, she stood at the edge of the woods. The sun dipped low, casting gold across the treetops. She felt no fear now, only memory. She whispered one name. Not a curse, not a prayer. Aliko. The wind carried it gently between the trees. And for a moment, the forest whispered back.